Hello and welcome. I'm Isuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israeli fire killed at least 40 Palestinians in Gaza, including many near a US-backed aid site, as the UN condemned the new Israeli-backed aid system as a lethal distribution system that violates humanitarian principles. Meanwhile, survivors described the aid site as deadly trap, with the UN urging a return to impartial aid distribution. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan have jointly called for an immediate end to the Israel-Iran conflict through political and diplomatic means, as tensions escalate, with Tehran accusing Israel of bombing a hospital and Pakistan have closed its border with Iran. Ukraine says Russia has returned 1,245 more bodies of fallen soldiers, completing a deal to repatriate over 6,000 as President Zelensky arrives in Vienna for diplomatic talks. G7 leaders gathered in Canada as tensions rose over the Israel-Iran conflict, with Trump backing Israel's strikes, Europe calling for calm, Japan condemning Israel, and deep divisions threatening global unity. Canada and the UK have agreed to form a trade working group to deepen economic ties, expanding cooperation in digital trade, critical minerals, and AI, while also strengthening defense collaboration and support for Ukraine ahead of the G7 summit in Alberta. European and US authorities have shut down the dark web drug platform Archetype Market, seizing its infrastructure in the Netherlands and arresting a 30-year-old German in Barcelona. The site was known for selling fentanyl. Airbus secured a $3.5 billion order from Saudi Arabia Avilis as the Paris Air Show opened amid tensions. France shut 4 Israeli stands over weapons displays, sparking Israeli outrage. Boeing CEO skipped the event due to focusing on the Air India crash probe. The U.S. aircraft carrier USS Nimitz left the South China Sea and is heading west towards the Middle East amid escalating Iran-Israel tensions after canceling a planned port call in Vietnam due to an emergent operational requirement. Israel and Iran continue to trade deadly strikes as their escalating air war enters day 4. Israel's latest airstrikes hit Iranian military and missile sites, including the Quds Force headquarters in Tehran. IDF says over 120 Iranian launchers have been destroyed. Jets remain active over Iran. Tel Aviv confirms 24 dead, over 97 injured. A residential tower in Haifa was hit. A power plant in the north caught fire. Barak Magan air defense was used for the first time. In Iran, the death toll from Israeli strikes has climbed to 224 people. Tehran accuses Israel of hitting a hospital in Kermanshah. The Grand Bazaar in Tehran has been closed. Iran's president has called for unity against genocidal aggression. Iran has also halted nuclear talks with the US. Iran retaliated with a massive missile barrage on Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. 11 more Israelis died today. The U.S. embassy in Tel Aviv suffered minor damage. The Jerusalem embassy remains shut, and President Donald Trump warned Iran against targeting U.S. interests. He rejected regime change but confirmed blocking an Israeli plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader. The region remains on high alert amid fears of wider war. The world is responding to Israel-Iran tensions. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan have called for an immediate halt to the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. The Kremlin says both leaders stressed that tensions must be resolved peacefully through diplomacy and political dialogue, including on Iran's nuclear program. In a separate statement, Erdogan warned Putin that Israel's actions are threatening regional security. Turkey has offered to mediate and facilitate de-escalation talks. Meanwhile, Pakistan has sealed all border crossings with Iran, citing security risks as missile exchanges between Tehran and Tel Aviv continue. In Brussels, the EU dismissed Russia as a neutral mediator. Officials say Moscow's growing military ties with Iran undermines its credibility.
And let's also recall the fact that there has been a recent Russia-Iran partnership agreement which signals deepening cooperation across multiple areas, including foreign policy and defense. In light of such, Russia cannot be an objective mediator.
Now we have guest joining us, Jonathan Hoffman. He's a former Vice President of Zionist Federation of the United Kingdom, joining us live from London, UK. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How do you assess Israel's objectives in targeting Quds Force headquarters and over 120 missile launch sites in Iran? Are these strikes strategic or symbolic?
They are definitely strategic. They're not symbolic. Iran has threatened Israel with elimination, extermination for years. And Iran was building up nuclear capacity and was clearly cheating on the agreements which were made. We don't know how much, well, we don't know where the uranium is for Iran. That's, I think, the crucial question. But there is no doubt that Israel's attack is strategic. Israel has attacked only military and a few political places, although Iran's attacks have been indiscriminate on civilians. That's the difference.
You will stay with us as we take one breaking news. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that Israel is on the path to victory as airstrikes continue to strike targets in Iran. He announced that the Israeli Air Force now controls the skies over Tehran, warning civilians to evacuate. Netanyahu said Israel is advancing towards its two main objectives, eliminating Iran's nuclear threat and destroying its missile capabilities. Now we come back to our guest discussion. Jonathan Hoffman is joining us as former Vice President of Zionist Federation in London. Jonathan, how is Israeli citizens reacting to this news, and also what is the support that Netanyahu is getting from its citizens, as we saw last week that Tel Aviv was stormed with some protests against the current regime?
Well, let's remember the 20 months since the 7th of October 2023. This has been a desperately difficult time for people in Israel. Not just the attempt to eliminate Hamas in Gaza, but now also the attempt to eliminate the nuclear threat from Iran. It's been a really very difficult time, but as far as one can see, people in Israel are very supportive of the government. I think the political disagreements that we've seen over judicial reform and over the hostages, whether the government was prioritizing the hostages sufficiently, when the country is under existential threat, those differences disappear. And the Prime Minister Netanyahu was, when he went to Bat Yam, which has been bombed, people there very much supported him, and you can see the video of him supporting him. So the population of Israel, when Israel is under threat, and we've seen this time and time again, people come together.
And can you say the same thing about the Iranian citizens who we know that a lot of them are not in good terms with or agree with the current regime? However, because of these Israeli strikes, we now kind of see that there's kind of unity among them.
I think that everybody is looking to see what the Iranian population thinks, and Iran doesn't allow journalists, international journalists, in, as far as I know. So it's very difficult to get a grasp of how people are reacting. I think obviously the first reaction is concern. The fact is that we know that people are trying to leave Tehran, people are trying to move away from anywhere that might be hit, and that's perfectly understandable. But I think there's an underlying, especially amongst the young, there's an underlying opposition to the government in Iran. We saw in September 22 this protest, which was called the Woman Life Freedom Protest, where a woman called Mahta Amini, who was not wearing her hijab properly, she was brutally repressed, and indeed she died. And we saw popular uprising, particularly amongst the young, which was brutally repressed. So I think that the potential is there in Iran for a popular uprising, but so far we haven't seen any evidence. But clearly the regime is not popular. They're very strict on religious clothing, very strict on morality. Iranian people don't have freedom, and particularly the young people, I think, would like to see the regime overthrown. That is not an explicit aim of the Israeli action, but of course it would be welcomed as a byproduct of the action. But so far the jury is out on that.
And now moving back to Israel, is the public in Israel prepared for a prolonged conflict with Iran, especially at the death toll, civilian death toll also is rising on both sides, and now today is the day 4 of this continued strikes?
Oh dear. The fact is there's no alternative, and I think people recognize that. Iran was a threat to Israel. They have said several times that they wanted to see the end of Israel. This is an existential battle. Israel since 1948 has faced a number of existential fights, and this is one of them. So I think the population is exhausted, especially the people who've had to go to the army several times. They've had to fight in Gaza. Many families have lost people in Gaza. So I think people are utterly exhausted over the past 20 months, but there's no alternative. So they support the action and will continue to support the action.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Hoffman, for joining us and bringing your expertise and insights to our conversation. Now we move on to our next story. At least 40 people have been killed in Gaza, according to the territory's Hamas-run health ministry, as Israeli fire targeted an aid distribution area in Rafah. Medics say half of the dead were near a site operated by the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Over 200 others were injured. The United Nations has slammed Israel's aid delivery plan, calling it a lethal distribution system. UN agencies say aid is being delivered through dangerous channels controlled by Israeli troops, cutting out long-standing humanitarian partners like the UNRWA. UNRWA's chief, Filipe Lazzarini, warned that starving people are being killed while simply trying to reach food. Israel has not commented on today's deaths, but says aid is being diverted by Hamas. a claim the militants deny. According to Gaza's health ministry, over 300 people have been killed and more than 2,600 wounded near aid sites since the new system began. The UN rights chief Volker Turk has accused Israel of weaponizing food and called for a full investigation. The Gaza War, triggered by Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack, has now killed nearly 55,000 people in the Strip, most of them being civilians. That's according to Gaza's health officials. Now we have guest Ali M. Abushbak. He's a Middle East researcher. He's joining us live from Cairo, Egypt. Thank you, Ali, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. What does the attack on the aid distribution site in Rafah reveal about the current conditions for humanitarian access in Gaza?
Thank you, Osama, for having me. Me just worth mentioning that the casualties in Gaza, it's crossing more than 60,000 Palestinians, most of them civilian. Israel's troop targeting the people who's starving to gathering to forsake, grabbing the food and sack of flour on the ground. It's a terrible idea, and it's a horrible and terrible things. Yes, today just now I was talking to someone who survived from the Israelis attack. He confirmed that they were a civilian and they were unarmed people. So when I asked them why the Israelis targeting the civilian who gathered to take a sack of flour and taking a food from the humanitarian aid, and if you're from a humanitarian zone that Israel identify it as a safe zone, as a unarmed zone to gather the people. He mentioned that all of them, they were completely civilian, and he doesn't know why the Israeli troop opened the fire toward them. And he said, we rarely got survivor from this attack. There is one thing, in my opinion, what Israel is trying to do, creating a chaos among the Palestinians, despite there is a chaos among the Palestinians. As I mentioned the day before yesterday, there is a people killing each other to take the sack of flour from each other. And there is some militia group in Gaza. I mean, they are maybe they are fifth column. They're targeting the civilian who collecting food, and they steal it from them. So all of that because of the we can say power vacancy in Gaza. There is no ruler, there is no police, and also Israeli troop trying to kill anyone who can manage the citizen civilian, the citizen's life in Gaza. In my opinion, what is happening in Gaza nowadays, it's completely beyond the imagination. I success after that 10 days of the blackout of the internet in Gaza. I success to talk to someone else, and he confirmed that his neighborhood children, he's 3 years old, he die because of the starvation and famine. When I asked him, show me the proof, because I can't imagine 3 years old the children he got die because of the famine and because of the starvation, and he shared the photo with me. This is honestly painful things at the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It's beyond the imagination. Despite these things, there is a good news coming and leaking that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to send the delegation to Qatar for there is a positive atmosphere between Hamas and Israel to find a solution and for negotiation, especially after the Iran's attack. Most of the analysts they confirmed that Israel now is going to focus on the Iranian front rather than Gaza, because Hamas is completely devastated. Despite there is a limited fighter for Hamas exist in Gaza, but they have a limited power and they have no control on the people. And we have witnessed the chaos in Gaza, the mess in Gaza. That's confirmed that Hamas it's devastated, completely devastated. And now also, in my opinion, the coming days, it will be a good atmosphere, a good news for Palestinians in Gaza for at least a truce or for ceasefire for a couple of months until and unless Israel finds a solution with Iran, especially Iranians hit it's very strong. And today morning we have witnessed that the size of the destruction in Tel Aviv and the Israeli city, it was huge, honestly. So what is happening on the ground in Gaza, it's completely behind the imagination. The humanitarian situation, it's completely dire, and I can't find any excuses why they are targeting the civilian who gather to take a sack of flour or or some food to survive. Today also I asked someone, he said the supplies and the vegetable in the market, there is a lake in the vegetable in the market, and if you are lucky and you have a chance to find it, it's a more expensive. It's behind, I mean, extremely expensive. No one can imagine the price of 1 kg. There is no one can have the ability to buy 1 kg of tomato or potato or any of vegetable. You can buy it by just by one, and it's incredibly the price of it. No one can manage this their everyday life. Now, most of the 2 million people, they rely on the humanitarian aid. People who's working and people who save their money, they have no ability to manage their everyday lives. So you can imagine about the people who's living under the poverty line. They couldn't able to survive, and they are eating most of the day. I mean, all of their weeks, they have a dal, they have some eggplant. So situation is completely, totally dire in Gaza.
And Ali, building on that, now that the aid system is all not very stable and every day there are deaths occurring in this aid site, should international humanitarian actors like UNRWA or UN be restored to their full role, or has the aid framework become now too politicized to function effectively?
Uzuma, it's worth mentioning that the international community condemned that Israelis using the food as a war weapon, and everyone condemned that the famine in Gaza, the totally besieged for more than 2-3 months in Gaza. All the international community condemned it, and no one accepted. And there is some countries like UK and like also Canada, they imposed a sanction on Israel, and some Israelis ministry in who used to always giving the statement and extremist statement against the Palestinian. International community, they should take their rules to disseminate the food, despite they are disagree with the American Israeli-backed organization, which taking the responsibility to distributing the food for the people who are suffering from the famine and the starvation. But everyone should take the action to save to save what remain from the dignity of the people in Gaza. And all for example, United Nations, they consider this faith of distributing the food, it's dehumanizing the people in Gaza. It's completely, we have showed that, we have seen the footage how the people are gathering in a humanitarian situation. They are gathering under the risk. They are gathering, mass of people. So some of them, they got killed because of the crowd. This is unhuman. This is, disrespecting the humanitarian value. Especially at the end, they are human. They need some food. They need some to survive. And most of them, they are civilian. You can't, publicly punish the people. You can't publicly punish the people for what? Just because they are living under the rule of Hamas. So this is the policy of Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not saying Israel, because Benjamin Netanyahu is the only responsible. Palestinian and Israel, they are seeking for the peace. And we have witnessed the day before yesterday how many Palestinian active and Israeli active participate in Paris conference for peace and for two-state solution. So we have here to take a stand with the people who are suffering from the famine and starvation. I guess international community should take an action to save the what's remain from the dignity. I mean, what's remain
Ali,
of the humanitarian value in Gaza.
Ali, thank you very much for bringing your expertise and sharing your insight with us. Now we had Ali M. Abushbak join us as Middle East researcher. Now we move on to our next story. Russia and Ukraine have declared that a fifth exchange of dead bodies has taken place. Kyiv has confirmed that the bodies of 1,245 Ukrainian servicemen have been returned from Russia as part of a continuing effort under the Istanbul agreements. These exchanges come after months of negotiations between both sides, according to Ukraine's coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war. The repatriated remains include soldiers who died in intense combat zones, including Bakhmut and Mariupol. Meanwhile, Russian presidential aide and chief negotiator Vladimir Medinsky told Russian media that Moscow is prepared to transfer an additional 2,239 bodies to Ukraine. He also confirmed that Ukraine has so far handed over 78 bodies of Russian servicemen to Moscow. Medinsky said that since the start of these agreements, Russia has returned a total of 6,060 bodies of Ukrainian fallen soldiers. Now we are joined by our guest, Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert joining us live from Brussels. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. What does this fifth round of body and fallen body exchanges signal about the current state of dialogue between Moscow and Kyiv despite active conflict?
Well, it indicates that at the technical level, the two sides remain in contact. And of course, it is extremely good news that there can be a closure to the suffering of the families of these soldiers. They can properly bury their loved ones, and something resembling human behavior returns to that land. Nonetheless, none of this has any implication for the chances of a ceasefire, let alone for the chances of a definitive peace between Russia and Ukraine. The parties remain very far separated by their ambitions in what they will get from the peace. That is to say, each side is expecting and demanding the capitulation, effectively the capitulation of the other side. And under those conditions, it is not foreseeable that negotiations can result in any agreements.
And now you will stay with us as we have a breaking news. Moscow confirms that newly planned Russia-US consultations have been cancelled at Washington's initiative. Russia's foreign ministry says it hopes the current diplomatic pause with the United States won't last long. Now we come back to our guest discussion, Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert joining us live from Brussels. What is your reaction about the breaking news that we just took, that the consultations have been cancelled at the Washington's initiative?
Well, I don't think it makes a great deal of difference. Washington's mind right now is fully focused on the Middle East and on the ongoing conflict, armed conflict between Iran and Israel. The United States is deeply concerned that its bases in the Middle East will be attacked by the Iranians, and so I don't think they have too much brain power to spare to consider the furtherance of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, which in any case have not yet produced any positive results.
And building on that, how does the asymmetry in the number of bodies returned, being 6,060 Ukrainian versus 78 Russian soldiers only reflect the intensity or geography of the frontline losses? And is this being used by Russia as a soft power here?
I don't think that the discrepancy in numbers fully reflects of these corpses, fully reflects the discrepancy in the kill or seriously maimed ratio of those in the Ukrainian armed forces versus the Russians. There are other elements here as well. It's been a safe assumption among most experts that the Russians have enjoyed a 7 to 10 advantage over the Ukrainians, meaning that 7 Ukrainians or 10 Ukrainians have been killed or seriously wounded in the combat in Donbass versus 1 Russian. Now, when you speak about 70 soldiers, Russian corpses being exchanged for so far 6,000 and maybe 7,000 Ukrainian corpses, that of course is unrepresentative of the numbers I just gave. But I think it's accounted for by something else. The Ukrainians have notoriously left their fallen and dead on the battlefield and have run for their lives when they were subjected to a Russian attack. And I think the Russians have been much more careful about recovering the bodies of their fallen in the military conflict. That is probably a bigger factor than anything else.
Thank you very much, Gilbert Doktorov. He's a Russian affairs expert, for joining us and sharing your insight. Now that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.